When in the end of 2014 it was announced that Obama and Raúl Castro had talks and were discussing a rapprochement, it came as a big surprise. Raúl Castro had earlier mentioned, I mean, when he took over power, that he was thinking about something like that, but we were very surprised, everyone. And also very skeptical. The Cuban exile and the opposition in Cuba thought that an approach or reconciliation between the two countries would be like a betrayal, and you know, when a democratic country approaches a dictatorship, it's always it's a strange thing to happen. And they started to talk, and there were different reactions to this. UNPACO, the organization that we now are supporting, were positive and thought that this could make a breakthrough, and it could lead to a change in the situation in the country. And the first thing that was announced was that they were freeing some 52 political prisoners. That was not all, because some 50 more remained in prison, and many of those were long-term prisoners who had been for a long time. But UNPACO got most of its political prisoners freed in that occasion. And the discussions went on, but there was no change in the repression against the opposition. And as soon as the 52 were released, several of them were imprisoned once again. And there were no reactions from the Obama administration, and they were very lukewarm because they wanted to go ahead with their relationships. And finally, they also opened their embassy in Havana. And it was a lot of international coverage of these procedures. And American businessmen were hanging on I mean, were so eager to start business with Cuba, which is also very surprising, because Cuba has absolutely nothing to offer. They have the thing they have to offer is the cheapest workers in the world. The Cubans, they work for slave salaries. There is no country in the world with lower salaries than Cuba. They work for less than $1 a day. The minimum salary is around $15 a month. And that could be attractive, of course, but according to all international standards, it's an abuse to work with the state of Cuba. And there is no private sector, really. Everything is owned by the state and controlled by the state. The small so-called private sector, they call them cuenta propistas, which means that they stand for their own accounts or something like that. And this is only allowed in a limited sector, service sector of diverse patterns, very strange things like filling cigarette lighter or repairing mattresses and things like that. But what was very important was, of course, that they allowed cafeterias and restaurants and also bed and breakfast to serve the tourist sector, and that is has become very important. But they are not allowed in this sector to grow. If they grow, they are closed down, and there is a super control over all private businesses, and they are persecuted in the streets.
Y que los cuentas propistas tienen que comprar en el mercado negro.
Yeah, and they all.
Y es corrupción.
Yeah, and they are all living from what is sent from abroad from their families, and or on what they can steal from state enterprises. And the black market in all communist countries, as you know, are always very important, and the country cannot survive without the black market. And so is it with the private sector. Obama thought that he could establish some contact with the private sector. But this is not possible, because the private sector is not allowed to import or export or do anything of the kind officially. And and the rest is not private sector, the rest is the state or controlled by the military. Cuba is governed by a kind of military junta and the family Castro. Well, so the Obama his hopes was that through getting into Cuba, into its private sector, this would lead to an opening of the country. But this never happened. And there were so many delegations sent from the States to Cuba, and they never came about with anything. Nearly no investments were allowed. The only thing that Obama managed was which was positive, or where Raúl Castro met up a bit, was that he allowed some Wi-Fi zones in the streets. But he controls that with money, because it's very expensive to get access to internet, and it's only those with money that can manage that, and so this reconciliation would not lead to anything, and what it led to was more and more repression, in fact. And it was like Raúl Castro wanted to show Obama that he is governing this country. And when Obama came to Havana and held his famous speech, which he forced the government to send live, it became very popular in all the population, and this speech is circulating around in the population for a long time, and even the party members and the followers of the Castro regime, which are very few today, but even those were impressed by Obama. And that, after that speech, Raúl Castro got really nervous, because and Fidel Castro woke up from his sickbed and wrote an article very strong against Obama, and said that he was trying to infiltrate Cuba. He was like a Trojan horse, or everybody was scared of the reactions and his popularity. And the repression became so hard that the ladies in white that usually walk every Sunday from church and walk along a street to protest against the political prisoners and demand their releases, they were imprisoned every Sunday, and they were no longer permitted to go even to church on Sundays. And UNPACO had a lot of their activists and leaders imprisoned, and they are now up in around 50 political prisoners. And the repression today is very serious, and it seems like the dictatorship is trying to close down all opposition. Okay.
Sí, aquí vas a salir así, mira.